Views expressed on this program are those of the host, guest, and callers, and are not necessarily those of this station, its management, or other advertisers. You're listening to Transformation Talk Radio.
Welcome to the Karmic Path with your hosts, Tina Irwin and Laura Van Tyne. Join us as we dive into the normal and the paranormal to break through the darkness and to help you realize how karma, spiritual law, and psychic ability all combine to open the doors of understanding. This is the place where we build the karmic connections between science, psychology, and spirituality. But can we change our karmic path? Can we help someone else's karma? Stay tuned and join us for an opportunity to look at life and spirituality from a down-to-earth, no-nonsense, practical perspective. The Karmic Path radio show with Laura and Tina, Better Karma for Better Living, starts now.
Welcome, everyone, to the Karmic Path. I'm Tina Irwin, and I'm here with my co-host, Laura Van Tyne. We know that everyone has a karmic path, whether they're aware of it or not, and our actions echo out, and our actions and reactions can echo out and often collide. So our passion is to offer you a new way of looking at life so perhaps you can improve your karmic path. And nothing is more dynamic than the echoing out of how you parent your children. It is the ultimate karmic ripple effect. Oh my gosh.
It is, isn't it? And parenting it's hard work, right? And
really?
It's just a little bit. Here's a question for you. How is it that like this average 7-pound human being can have actually more assets than the parents? If you think about it.
Well, they're actually really capable of completely manipulating parents too.
They are. They
train you really early.
Which is probably a good thing. And one of the things that we want to talk about is that our parents are our first teachers, for better or for worse, right? But it's always a karmic learning experience.
And whether you realize it or not, is once you're a parent, you can never go back. Your life is changed forever. And even if you give up your child, your life is still changed because you have the memory that happened. So having a child is going to change you no matter what. That's not right or wrong or good or bad. It's just not the reality of the event.
But it's something to think about as people are deciding whether or not they want to have kids, is that they don't go away. They're not like puppies.
They should decide that whether or not they want to have sex. I mean, there's a cause and effect there too. It's like, oh my gosh, how did I get pregnant?
Well, that happens every now and then.
It does happen every now and then. And sometimes birth control doesn't work.
Yeah. But, we're always karmically responsible for the children that we raise. We're karmically responsible for those around us in our lives too. But
to a degree.
But when we're looking at children, we're really responsible for them.
And the point is, there's no perfect parents. There are no perfect children. There's no perfect grandparents. We are here to learn from one another. And the parent earns positive or negative karma along this path of parenthood. And nothing is more of a karmic challenge, I think, than parenting. Because what you do at the age of 2 is going to hit you square between the eyes at the age of 12 and 20. I mean, it will come back to you. Your inability to say no to a toddler will mean that if you can't say no to a 2-year-old because they're so cute and you don't want them to love you, that's going to manifest in a really negative way when they are.
This is my bad. Sorry. I was starting a watch party on Facebook.
While I'm talking? Really?
I forgot to turn off the volume. Sorry.
The point we're getting here kind of slowly is that parenting's a lifelong mission. And if you think you're struggling with a parenting moment, ask somebody for advice before you knee-jerk reaction and say no or get out or whatever.
One of the best things that we can do in any situation, but especially as parents, is just take a breath.
Kids are going to test you. It's just how it is.
It's their job.
It's their job. And part of their job is to help you grow as a parent and as a person. And we don't get it right 100% of the time. And sometimes if you're really in a quandary, your kid says, I'm going to do this, and you have a little time before you just knee jerk that reaction, take a step back.
Well, and I want to go back to there are no perfect parents, because and let's talk about perfection, because there's perfection and there's wisdom. A wise parent is going to take the time to reflect on their childhood, right? What was done to you? What would you have wanted done to you? What would you want done differently? Or what did you want that was the same? What do you value?
And sometimes the experience that you have with a particular parent can be horrific, but sometimes that experience can be so precious and so important that you would like to be able to duplicate maybe that parent's patience or that parent's wisdom, or the fact that that parent was wise enough that you could go to that parent with anything.
And if you didn't have those types of parents, did you have neighbors or friends or someone else that had those types of parents that you would want to emulate as a parent yourself?
And sometimes we certainly see this with single parents. Especially,
it's hard being a single parent.
It's hard. My husband spent 42 years at sea, so I was pretty much a single parent for my kids' lives. And it doesn't matter whether you're a single parent. Just because they don't have a father physically present doesn't matter at all, because the rules are still the rules. The requirements are still the requirements. And if you don't have a second parent to help you out, oh well, you still are responsible for holding the line and being wise and growing in the situation. And maybe that's your karmic opportunity. Maybe that's why there's not another person in the scene. And if you have one parent who loves to be the good guy and give them everything and spoil them, and you're supposedly the bad guy parent, don't be the bad guy parent. Be the wise parent. There's a big difference.
There's a balance too, right? Because kids, part of their job is to see if they can divide and conquer.
Well, I mean,
they're testing the boundaries.
We all know the kid who, goes to dad because, if you're a daughter, you can wrap daddy around your little finger, and mom's always going to say no. So you go to dad, and dad will supposedly always say yes until mom says to dad, don't do that again. Ask what did your mother say?
And part of what we're talking about with karmic parenting is I want to have a discussion about conditional love and unconditional love, because I think this is so important. When you put a condition on something, if this, then that, when we make our love conditional to our kids, it really wrecks their self-esteem. It makes them feel not worthy. If your child does something that was not the best choice, etc., still providing them unconditional love is a really big deal. And I've got teenagers now, and I have one of my kids' friends has a male friend, not a boyfriend, male friend that has long hair, and the parents are like super upset that their kid has long hair.
Been there, done that.
Okay. I mean,
we had our son one of our sons, and when he was in high school, had hair down to his waist. And people said,
for a couple Navy people?
For Navy parents, oh my God, how did you handle that? And what we did was we looked at each other and we said, he's a mechanic. How long do you think that long hair is going to last? And so what we did was we sat down and instead of making it a fight, because it could be a fight, we said, look, this is what's important to us, that it's neat and clean and keep it neat and clean and kind of pulled back. We don't care if you have long hair. It's not that big a deal. And all of a sudden, this big bubble of emotion just went, woo, and it went away. And the day he graduated from high school, he cut his hair. And by the time he went to car college, it was a crew cut.
So what you're saying is that having a fight over hair follicles
is ridiculous.
It's crazy. Is that what
I know? Okay. One parent, there was a fashion many years ago where guys would come home with these mutton chop sideburns.
You're so dating yourself, but go ahead.
I know, but people do all kinds of crazy things. And this one parent said, you're not ever entering this house with those. Go shave them off right now. Instead of saying, oh my gosh, that's so cool. Is that the new fashion? Tell me about it.
Or ignoring it.
Completely ignoring it and just moving on and having a wonderful visit. Instead, the entire visit was predicated on the power. I must have power. You will shave those off. The hammer of the parent's power when your kid's in college. What's happening here? It isn't necessary. You could say, oh, wow, I love your mutton chops.
And sometimes
take the energy out of it.
Right. And when you do that, you're diffusing the drama. You're reducing the drama in everybody's life. And that's so, it really gives the adrenal glands a little rest now, doesn't it?
It doesn't need to be that way.
It doesn't. And when we're going to also be talking about family patterns and what was done to me. And in our book, Soul Evolution, Past Lives and Karmic Ties, we discuss these following elements that affect all of our soul evolution: our karma, our past lives, our soul frequency, free will choices, soul purpose or soul missions, soul evolution status, current life experiences, and early childhood experiences. These things all culminate to our soul growth and our soul personality.
And if you're a parent if you have children, and sometimes you enter a marriage and you're a step parent, and that can be amazing or it can be a nightmare. The bottom line is, if you have a parenting opportunity and in some life, you will have to be a parent. Maybe not this life, but at some point.
Well, that's a good point.
In your soul evolution, you must step up to the parent plate.
Sometimes we're not parents in a lifetime, so we can get a break. We're not all meant to be parents in every single lifetime. And I want to bring that up because I know there are people out there who desperately think they need to be a parent, but
not necessarily.
Not necessarily, maybe not in this lifetime.
But you'll get another opportunity.
And in last week's show, we talked about what was your origin story, and we discussed in depth how early childhood experiences, in fact, color our outlook on the world for the rest of our lives. And so if we grew up with severe abuse and trauma, the ability to heal and trust is difficult.
And so you can listen to that show because it was really amazing.
Yeah, but if you grew up in a loving and secure environment, it's different. You have a different outlook. So you can find that show on thekarmicpath.com.
And you're listening to The Karmic Path on Transformation Talk Radio. And if you think we're specific in our show, can you imagine what we share in our online courses, which you can find at thekarmicpath.com. And we'll be right back.
Welcome back to the Karmic Path on Transformation Talk Radio. We want to thank our sponsors, the Oil Lounge, for this production of this show. And we're talking about karmic parenting.
We all have free will and how we're going to respond.
By the way, this is actually a quote from our book.
Okay.
I didn't know if you knew that.
I should know that. I think I wrote this.
Yeah, you did. This was your part.
We all have free will and how we will respond to each page of experiences, encounters, traumas, and joys that are presented to us. Each free will decision we make determines the next step in our path, but it's never so easy as simply putting one foot in front of another.
And that is from the book Soul Evolution, Karmic Ties, Past Lives and Karmic Ties. Because free will, we all have choices to make, and parents especially will have choices to make in how they react to family patterns, et cetera, and children, it's everything.
Okay, well, let's talk about family patterns.
Okay.
There are some family patterns that are really wonderful. That's just one great family generation after the other. They love each other. Family is really important, and they keep some kind of a balance. That family is the exception. The norm is the dysfunctional family. I hate to say that.
Unfortunately, it is, because we've got poverty, abuse, sexual abuse, divorce, addictions, et cetera. And as we're talking about this, I'm thinking about this kid that I spoke with maybe about a couple months ago. He was a fascinating kid, and he was about 22 or so, and he gave a speech, a presentation, and his presentation was about how he grew up in poverty. He grew up in poverty, and one day his mom got a job at McDonald's. And they were all so excited because mom could bring any leftover McDonald's food home. So, for a hungry, teenage boy, that's a big deal. But what he ended up learning was nutrition. Because he consumed 3 meals a day, 7 days a week that was at McDonald's, he started to gain weight, and he didn't like that. And what he ended up doing was he educated himself enough to get a scholarship so he could study health and nutrition and sports med. So my question to him was, had he have not grown up in poverty, had his mom not have given them McDonald's meals, by the way, cold, stale McDonald's meals all those years, would you be on this path of being a nutritionist?
And his answer was?
I never thought about it like that. He never thought about that family pattern of poverty and how you have a choice to take that family pattern and make a difference.
I have a friend who is an adoption attorney, and she does all kinds, but she also does adult adoptions. And she said, referring to herself, I was an adult adoption. I came from a really abusive family. And I don't look at my childhood as horrific. I look at it as the stepping stone to the current family I have because I love them. I experience unconditional love with this family, something I could never get from my biological family. And because this was such a powerful experience, I became an adoption attorney because I can see how this heals lives. So because I had a negative experience, I chose to make it a positive experience and unite people who love one another. I thought that's a great story.
It is. And we all have those choices. And divorce is another one. There are family patterns of divorce.
Oh, I have a story for that.
Okay.
My grandmother was divorced, and that would have been in the late 30s, early 40s.
18 or 17? I'm kidding. Sorry.
You are so clever. Get over it.
Okay.
And then my mother was divorced. And as my mother was divorcing, she looked at me, and I'm married, 18 months now. And she says, because I was divorced, that means you're going to be divorced because that's the family pattern. And I looked at her and I said, no, that doesn't describe my life. That's not going to be my pattern. Thank goodness, because 46 years later, that's not going to be my pattern.
It teaches us, though. I'm a child of divorced parents, and my parents got married and divorced 3 times by the time I was like 20. So we're talking no childhood drama in my life.
Oh
right?
my gosh. Can't even imagine.
And my husband and I dated for 7 years before I would get married.
Man, you're patient. I didn't even wait 7 months.
Well, no, because I didn't want to get married. I thought being married meant you fought all the time. That's what I thought. That was my frame of reference. And it made me more aware of what I wanted in a spouse. And those experiences I had in my childhood of being a product of divorced parents, but they married each other, by the way, 3 times. I don't know if I mentioned the each other part.
That's okay.
So it taught me what to look for, what I wanted, what I didn't want. I looked at those experiences and what do I want for my future kids if I had any?
I think the point of it is that you can break the family pattern. I obviously broke the family pattern, and I've seen family patterns of, I hate to say it, abortion, of child abuse. And I've seen family patterns of real goodness and service. Our family's policy is we do service for others or we do charity. Maybe their wealth. Wealth can be a family pattern too. As poverty can be a family pattern, so can wealth. Depends on how people handle their wealth and whether they're responsible about it and they bring up responsible children, or they think that the world owes them everything. It depends on how they look at it. How is that pattern going to be perpetuated?
And we all have those choices, especially we see abuse as a family pattern all the time.
We also see spiritual abuse.
Yeah.
If you're back through your history, everybody is a certain faith. And if you want to question that faith because you're exploring life and maybe that faith, some of the tenets of that particular faith don't work for you, then if you want to step away from it, it's like you've stepped away from the tribe and now you're an outcast, so they're going to leave you on an iceberg somewhere. I mean, you're basically emotionally frozen out because you left that faith.
Well, and that becomes a conditional love.
That absolutely becomes, if you don't follow our faith, then we can't love you. You can't be part of our family and our whole tribe. Now you are the outcast. It's like, when did that become okay?
And, you know, this is not a Christian bent show, but even Christ made sure that the families he was surrounded with were taken care of.
Well, this also brings up an issue that I think I have seen several times. And as I'm going through my own metaphysical lifespan here, I had two fascinating opportunities. One, I met a woman whose mother decided to follow Guru Mai. And if you followed Guru Mai, by gosh, you gave up your family and you went with the Guru Mai and you did all this stuff for her and you had to go to the ashram and do all of these things. And she just expected her children to cope with it, to deal with it. That's the term I hear. Well, they'll just have to deal with it. But you're a little kid and you feel abandoned by your mother. The ripple effect of that abandonment can affect health, can affect physical health, mental health, your sense of well-being, and how you manage relationships. And then I also had an interesting opportunity. I met a woman who was a different family, but she left her children to go work for Guru Mai. And she said, you know, it's my spiritual path to go work for the guru. I said, but how many children do you have? She said, well, I have 3 children. I left my husband and my kids because following the guru is the most important thing. And I said, but how do you think your children feel about it? And again, it was, you know, they just have to deal with it because my spiritual path is so important. It's so important you sacrifice the lives of 4 people and the trauma that created.
And how spiritual is that really? And we see this a lot. People ask us, you know, I want to, you know, go on a trek or spiritual journey for a year or whatever. And they've got like, you know, 2 kids that are at home. It's like, really? Excuse me. It affects their well-being.
I know an interesting individual who is an astonishingly spiritual man and is a super high frequency. And he's got 4 kids and a wife, and he's Muslim. And his children adore him. The thought that he would go on some track on his spiritual path and not include his children. I have learned so much from this man. I am blown away. And he believes in the sanctity of family and marriage and following, you know, what's within you and the patience and the balance with your family and your children, and that your spiritual path starts with your family. You don't abandon your family to find your path. And again, back to when Christ had the apostles, he made sure that their crops were in, that their families were taken care of for the limited period of time, that the families knew what they were doing, and that there was balance there. And I mean, they were following a living master at the time. And the issue of family is the integral part, the integral unit that sets a person up for all of their tomorrows, is completely beyond calculation.
And on that note,
take it away.
When we come back, we're going to be talking about what gives a person their personality. All babies have different personalities by far. We're going to be talking about that. You are listening to The Karmic Path on Transformation Talk Radio. And please check out theoillounge.com when you get a minute. Welcome back to The Karmic Path on Transformation Talk Radio. We're talking about parenting, karmic parenting, and we're especially talking about family patterns and how family pattern. There's so many family patterns, but somebody actually asked us a question a minute ago.
A listener. Someone actually listens to us.
You have a little faith. How often does somebody think that they're going to change their family pattern and break that family pattern only to find that they sort of just played right into the hands of that family pattern with various relatives or something? That was a really good question.
I think it's a really good question. I have at least 2 stories about that one. One of them has to do with if you actually really study and you work to identify a family pattern and then you think you're changing it, karma will test you.
Karma does. And
in this particular case, when I grew up, my mother would always give my father the 3rd degree every time he came back from a client, what happened and what they say and blah, 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 blah. And he was never adequate. And so they'd always have an argument. So when we retired from the Navy, we didn't wear plastic Navy shoes anymore and, dull colors. Troy went out on a job interview and I did, and he came back. And so I went back to my family pattern of questioning him, what did they say and how long was it? And how did you answer this? And I, as we're talking and I'm looking at the color drain from his face, I went, oh my gosh, I'm becoming my mother. And I said, I'm sure you did just fine. And I got up and walked out of the room because I was unconsciously going back to that pattern. And karma presented me with that opportunity, but I caught myself. And it's a function of insight. We had another opportunity when our son wanted to drive a car. And he got his license and everything. And he came to us and he said, gee, can I have sets of keys for both cars? And, he asked my husband, and my husband said, nope, and walked away. And he asked me, and I said, sure, sounds like a great idea. And so he said, do you know why Dad said no? And I said, because that's what his mom would have said. So we sat down, the 3 of us, and we had a conversation. And I said to my husband, if when you were James's age, what would you have wanted your parents to say to you when you asked that question? He looked squarely at our son and says, let's go get those keys made because I believe in you and you're a great driver.
And that's back when you could get keys made for a car for under $700.
It's not like you can get a fob made anymore. But in the days, because in the olden days, we used these metal things called keys and you put them into an ignition and you turn them on.
Right. We all have those things. I'm going to,
to my husband's credit, he saw the problem instantly and changed in a heartbeat. So good job, honey.
And he might be listening,
I hope so.
You bring up a really good point, though, and that is, I think we all do that. We all come into a marriage or relationship, parenting, with a family pattern that we may or may not be aware of. And I think it's the wise person who kind of takes that time to step back and reflect on your own childhood and what happened to you as a child and what did you want done. And we're talking about personalities in this segment also. Well, that was a great question to come in with. So thank you. Every child who's born comes in, we say, oh, babies are born with a blank slate. Not so much.
There's no blank slate.
They're not born innocent either. They come in, when people are born, they come in with karma. And we've said this before. Some people come in with a freight train of karma. Some people come in with a cute little, Coach handbag of karma. It's all different. It's not good or bad. It's just what that soul wants to come in to work on.
And a parent has an astonishing opportunity to mold and influence that personality in a positive way or a negative way. And an example is if you have, all 2-year-olds want their own way, or maybe they're 2 or 3-year-olds and they want their own way. And they want to know that their world is safe. This is among the first elements of molding personality. So if the parent is afraid to say no to the child, they don't love their child enough to say no. Now think about that.
Yeah, we're talking about this in the book Soul Evolution also. You need to love your child enough to say no.
And when you do that, you keep the child safe. The child knows where boundaries and limits are, and they know that you're courageous.
And they're stable. You give your child a solid foundation when you love them enough to say no. But having said that, using no wisely.
Exactly. And you can do it with a lot of no drama and wisdom. And one of the ways is to use the tone of your voice. And if you hear a parent say, now, Tommy, we don't do that, using the royal
we
way.
Don't spit on our friends.
You don't bite mommy. Mommy doesn't like that. It's like, what are you saying? You need to have that child understand that what they did was not correct and raise your voice. Change the tone and the timbre of your voice.
And as a teacher, the classroom kind of will, every now and then will kind of get a little loud or out of control. And if you raise your voice one octave and then you bring it back down, they lean in. All right, let's get started. Okay, we're ready to go. They stop and they pause with your voice. But if you find yourself getting louder and louder and louder and yelling at your kids, they tune out. But when you drop your voice to a low level, it's like they get permission to breathe for a moment and they listen. If
your child is going to run into the street,
yell.
Obviously yell. And you bring them back and you look at them and you say, stop that behavior right now. This is not safe. And change your voice. Get mad. Don't smile. Don't be afraid that you won't be their friend. You're not their friend. You're their parent. They need you to be the strong parent and say, no, that was wrong behavior.
And you bring up another good point. And a lot of parents are like, oh, my child is my best friend. That puts your child in such an elevated position to have your child be your best friend. It's not fair to the child.
Because when they're growing up, it's parent-child for a reason. You're supposed to be the wise one because a child looks at a parent like a god because they have power over you. The parent has power over the child. And I mean, we've heard parent after parent say, I have a 3-year-old terror and I don't know what to do. And they won't listen and they talk back and they bite and they kick and they scream. And I've seen this on airplanes. I've seen this.
Raise your hand if you've seen that on an airplane.
And I saw this, and we were first married in the Navy, and there were wives whose children were so well behaved, and the moms didn't scream or yell. They were always firm. And you saw the moms who had no clue what to do with that kid. They were nightmare kids.
Yeah, and kids don't really come with manuals either. And here's another part of the equation is that our kids, if you have more than one child, they are so different in personality. And why is it? We had a client a little while ago who had, a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old, and the 6-year-old daughter was kind and just easygoing and, thoughtful. And the 3-year-old daughter was just hell on wheels. And she was like, how can these two children be so different? And for some reason, that family needed the lesson of all of those different personalities and how to work those personalities together.
You cannot be the same parent for each kid.
Yeah.
You can't. Some children need a much stronger, more dynamic hand, and some kids need a softer hand on the reins.
I have one of my daughters is very sweet natured, wears her heart on her sleeve, and sometimes she throws it out on a fishing pole line too. Very good, kind person, and I have to handle her differently than I do with one of my other daughters who is rather forceful.
I have one of those kids. I have a kid that's the sweet, laid back, calm kid. And I have 2 kids who are...
You have to treat them differently.
The way they think is really different.
Yeah.
And some of them think faster than others. And if you aren't thinking fast enough with them, it's a problem. I also see kids who are so much smarter than their parents.
Oh, as a teacher, let me tell you, that's a dangerous combination. Kids who are smarter than their parents. And it happens a lot. And I think it happens because maybe parents get so busy or they simply don't care or they just, want to plug their kid into an electronic so they kind of leave them alone.
What I loved in The Big Bang Theory was Sheldon's mother was a genius at psychology.
Right.
She had a genius son, but she knew how to handle him more than any other person on the planet. And she wasn't a perfect parent in his eyes, but he adored her. He respected her. And by God, when she said, "You sit down right now," and she did.
Yeah.
and that methodology, because she set those limits, he knew she loved him. But Leonard's mother in Big Bang Theory was this very aloof psychologist who looked at him like he was an insect, with a pin through his body. She had no way to relate to him. There was no love there.
And when we're going to talk about a little bit more about where do our personalities come in and why we're so different when we come back from the break. But we're also going to talk about there can be no separation between spiritual, mental, physical, and our emotional selves. This is what comprises the human soul, are these elements, and what happens when we split those up.
You're listening to The Karmic Path on Transformation Talk Radio. And again, if you love the specifics that you hear on this show, you're going to love our courses. And we also incorporate a lot of the tools you're going to learn from the Oil Lounge. We'll be right back. Welcome back to The Karmic Path on Transformation Talk Radio. We're talking about the fact that there can be no separation between your spiritual, your physical, your emotional, and your mental selves, your mental
bodies.
You're a conglomeration of all of them. There is no separation.
And this is also part of where our personalities come in from, because our personalities are created life after life after life. We don't just live one lifetime and die and sit on a cloud and play the harp forever. What would the point of that be?
Exactly.
So this is over many lifetimes. Every lifetime, our personality gets molded and changed bits here and there, or sometimes a lot.
And parents have a responsibility to teach their children how to be responsible. I remember when one of our kids wanted to play in the band. They decided they wanted to play trumpet. And they said, I want to go play trumpet in the band. And I said, no, you got to really want it. No, I really want it. No. So I said, because you have to practice and you'll have to do this and you'll have to do that. And I mean, I got to know that this is really a big deal for you. And he begged me for weeks.
And it worked.
Oh my gosh. He wanted it so badly that he had to find out within himself if that's what he really wanted. Saying yes too easily can really deny a child. And so he said, no, Mom, I really want to do this, and became first chair trumpet and became such a figure in the band that it really helped to mold his personality. And you can have a person who's really brilliant, but if they don't have the self-discipline to be able to use that intelligence wisely.
Or if the parent doesn't have the ability to help instill that discipline.
And maybe if you know as a parent that you may not be up to the task, find a grandparent, find a mentor, find a teacher that can help you to help your child.
Because it comes down to free will. And we keep talking about the book Soul Evolution, Past Lives and Karmic Ties, because, and this is another little quote, free will applies to parents. It especially applies to parents. When you teach your child to behave or watch, when you teach your child to behave, or you can watch that ripple effect come back to bite you or not.
I mean, literally, when you teach your child to behave, they're not going to bite you.
Yeah.
They're not going to bite somebody else or spit and kick. And you have to hold the line. You cannot give in. And if a rule is a rule, the rule is a rule all the time. And it cannot change. It's not going to change.
It's not going to change. And there may be an extreme measure, but that's okay. And, as we're coming up with the show, Tina's like, don't be afraid of toddlers' tears and tantrums. And I'm thinking, that'd be a great show for TLC. Toddlers' tears and tantrums.
Yeah, I mean, if you're afraid because your child's going to cry.
And you know what? If you're afraid your child's going to cry in like a grocery store or something, or have a temper tantrum that's irrational, not because they're overtired or something, let them go for it. Let all those people stare at you like you're the worst parent in the world. It's okay.
Yeah. I mean, if you say no to your child, they go to the toy aisle in a store and they want this and you say no and you mean it and they start to cry, you can get down on their level and look into their face and say, no, you have toys at home. This is not what you're taking home. This is not acceptable behavior. We're going to leave the store now because you could not behave and understand limits. And walk smartly out of the store. Leave your cart. Take your purse. Leave your cart.
Yeah. And you're, again, loving your child enough to say no. And that's always going to be a karmic test. And when it comes to teenagers, I know we're focusing on little kids a lot, but when it comes to teenagers are at that point in their life where they need freedom so they can learn how to handle their adult life. As parents, a lot of parents are so afraid to give their kids that freedom. They want to helicopter parent them, etc. It doesn't do that kid any good to not give them the freedom. Give them the chance to fail, but let them fail wisely.
I would also offer that you as a parent need to be approachable. It doesn't mean you say yes to everything, but you don't knee-jerk reaction.
Well, and when it comes to teenagers, all they want you to do is listen. They don't want your advice. They already know everything, right? They're quasi-immortal, so they think. They just want you to listen. And as a parent, if you can just listen to your teenager, let them talk about whatever, you'll be amazed at what you find out about them and their friends.
Because they want to talk it out. Just like an adult wants to talk it out. And if you go, well, if you're horrified by what you're hearing, instead of going, oh my gosh.
Or just
get, well, let's think about this. Let's talk to me about how you're going to do this. Or let's look at the potential reactions if you take this reaction. Or let's look into the future. If you do this, what could happen? And you get them to think about other possibilities. At no time have you ever said no. You haven't screamed or yelled or were horrified or said they used poor judgment or criticized them. You haven't approached the conversation with any drama, but with thoughtful, well, let's talk about this. I think this is really fascinating.
Well, and what ends up happening is that
they want to talk to you all the time.
They want to talk to you all the time, but then their friends want to talk to you because you're the reasonable parent.
You're the reasonable parent.
You're the one that can offer, that advice when they want it, when they're asking, what would you do? They're going to be specific when they want advice from you. And that's a good place to be because you know where your kids are at. You know what they're doing. You know they're going to be honest. And the parents that tend to have the knee-jerk reactions and say no to everything and no, you're not allowed social media and you're not allowed to do this and you're not allowed to do that, tend to hide things and sneak things. And I'm telling you this as a former teacher.
You also have to understand that as a parent, your kids are watching your ethics. And if you tell them not to do something, but you do it, and you tell them that what they're doing is not okay, but you do it, what is the message? And if you're, my son and I were driving, my oldest son and I were driving somewhere, and he said, see that, Dad? He's riding a bike. His kid has a helmet, but he doesn't. He said, that's a horrible message. And I said, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
He's saying when you're an adult, you don't have to follow the rules. He's telling the kid, do as I say, not as I do. That's poor ethics. Or the parent that's having an affair and
right.
That behavior is okay. It's not okay.
And we're hoping that these conversations help people to look at their family patterns, their relationships with their children, grandchildren, etc., because it's really all about karma. And the science end of this is what you put into your relationships with your children and your loved ones is exactly what you're going to get out of it.
I couldn't have said that better.
And from a psychological viewpoint, you cannot buy self-esteem and respect. It has to be earned. and you have to love your child enough to say no. And the last part about the psychology is there are so many lessons that come with failure. Let your kids fail, let them fall. It's going to be okay. They will bounce back and they'll come back stronger.
And if they have a failed relationship, be there and for them to cry on your shoulder and just listen, let them talk it out.
And
look at what they learned. What did you learn from this relationship? Okay, it didn't work out. There's something to be learned from this.
And spiritually, our soul is the essence of who we are, what makes us human,
who we've always been.
It gives us our unique personalities. And that is encapsulated within who we are. And there can be no separation of our spiritual, mental, physical, and emotional bodies. When that happens, we start to break down as a human soul.
Exactly. The stronger you make your family unit, the stronger you make your children, and the happier life you're going to have when your children are adults. And so with that,
we want to thank you for listening to The Karmic Path on Transformation Talk Radio. Check out thekarmicpath.com and the online courses we have. There's some free courses there as well. And we want to give a special thanks to the Oil Lounge and also to Kat Grebe, our wonderful producer.
And we have something amazing coming up.
Oh, yeah.
You were going to say something about that.
I totally forgot. We got some fun stuff coming up next week. So check us out next week also, because we've got a really fun announcement we're so excited about.
Talk to you soon.
Thank you for spending time with us on the Karmic Path Radio Show. Listen live every Thursday at 4 p.m. Pacific Time as we explore the fascinating elements of karma and how to make those critical connections between spirituality, science, and psychology. Both of us are seasoned psychics living ordinary lives in public education and the military. Tina and I both have a deep-rooted dedication to learning how the unseen world works and to share this knowledge. Learn how to create a heightened sense of understanding and karmic awareness for greater personal balance with the Karmic Path. For more information, visit thekarmicpath.com.